Hey, how's it going? So, less than 4 months between videos this time, so we're definitely moving in the right direction. I did want to say thank you for the big positive response for the last video. I'm not gonna say that I'm gonna get any better at this, but we'll start cranking it out. See how long we can keep this going. So today I wanted to talk about some Vape Train flavors. So Vape Train sent me a whole bunch of stuff before I decided to take my little hiatus. Figured I should probably dig back into some of that. So today I'm going to be going over some of their melon flavors. I have their Shisha Melon, I have their Watermelon, and I have their Sorbet Base, which, spoiler alert, kind of a melon. So my standard disclaimer here applies. Vape Train did send me some of these. I bought some, but I'm just going to go ahead and say that Vape Train sent me some of this for free. So thank you very much, Vape Train. Starting right out, I have their Shisha Melon. Vape Train took the Inawera route with that whole shisha nomenclature. These have nothing to do with tobacco, really. They have no tobacco notes in them. They're just the kind of big, bright solo flavors that you'd actually use to flavor like a shisha tobacco. The actual melon here, for me, lands probably closest to cantaloupe. I want to say it reminds me a lot of Inawera's melon flavor too. And I think that one is supposed to be a canary melon. But yeah, it's just a pretty straightforward, slightly candied cantaloupe flavor. It's kind of hard because cantaloupe by default sort of tastes candy, so I don't mean to make it sound like it's just like only a candy flavor, but it does have that kind of pale orangeness that you would expect from something like a cantaloupe. This does definitely run towards artificial for me. I do get like some minor off notes here. It can get a little bit floral, I guess, and since it's a melon that gets a little floral, it may have just a little bit of soapiness to it. That floral note does seem to steep down quite a bit, which is good. It also tastes a little funky, and I guess the easiest like reference point for me with that would be if you've had one of those trade fruit salad platter things that leave all the melon on the table. It kind of has the funkiness of a melon that's been left out on a banquet table a little bit too long. So beyond just that melon note, I do get a good amount of vanilla in here. And when you say like, oh, there's vanilla in a fruit, it sounds like it's like weird or whatever, but a lot of fruits use like a vanilla flavor. And the vanilla here actually goes pretty well. It's like a very kind of straightforward, bright, just straight vanilla flavor. This does seem to have some actual like whipped cream component to it when I'm vaping it. Like it feels like cantaloupe on top of whipped cream. Like there's a fluffiness to this along with that kind of candied watermelon. The overall effect is pretty pleasant, actually. It works pretty well. But I feel like when you're mixing with this, it's something you're going to have to account for. Where you'd use this, I would look sort of as a base flavor for fruit mixes because it already has that like kind of sweet cantaloupe. It already has that sort of vanilla whipped cream kind of thing. I think the easiest thing to do with the flavor would be to go ahead and start throwing some additional stuff in there. I think it'd work really well with like strawberries, blueberries, kiwis, maybe even like a peach or something. But basically you'd be going for something like a fruit cup with some vanilla whipped cream, which honestly sounds pretty good as a juice. The other place that I feel like you could use this would be as the base for a candy. There's something about the way that the vanilla is interacting with that like candied cantaloupe flavor here that kind of makes me think of something like a melon haichu. You know, it's that kind of generic melon flavor in that creaminess, and that vanilla is only going to sort of work to your advantage in those candy recipes. Percentage-wise, I'd probably go about 5-6% as like primary flavor or base flavor, you know, if you're going to go ahead and build on top of it. So for most of the applications I've actually listed, this wouldn't necessarily be my go-to for an accent cantaloupe flavor just because it has so much baggage with it. But if you were going to use it as an accent, I'd probably shoot more towards 2 or 3%. Next, I have Vape Train's Watermelon. I've kind of went around on circles on this flavor. It's one of the ones that I tested fairly early, and so I've had a couple bottles of this sitting around at different sort of steep points. When you mix it fresh, it reminds me a lot of Flavor West's watermelon, but boozy, which is really interesting. I'm kind of a Four Loko connoisseur, or I was, I guess. But it really reminds me of like that watermelon note that they use in like flavored vodka and, you know, Four Loko, RIP. But it's not bad. you know, it just has like a little bit of like an ethyl alcohol kind of bite. And that alcohol bite comes out clearer than just other flavors that are based on ethyl alcohol. I don't know if it's like the contrast or whatever, but there definitely seems to be just like kind of a raw, hot booze note to this fresh. The actual watermelon here is, I'm gonna say, leaning more towards the artificial. It isn't like straight up like candy watermelon. You know, it's not like that kind of like tart, very red flavor. I think if anything, I'd call it like more of a like softer artificial watermelon. Instead of like Sour Patch Kids, it reminds me of like watermelon Laffy Taffy. It's kind of soft, it's kind of creamy. That softness and that creaminess really does sort of come out a bit more with a very lengthy steep as some of that alcohol dies down. I think I tested this after about 2 months was the last time that I actually went back to it. And that creaminess had really kind of amped up. I was getting a little bit of like a distinct vanilla taste, but that booziness doesn't ever quite go away from me. It's still kind of sitting in the background of the mix. I feel like there are some realistic parts of this too. So that candy watermelon flavor is just like such like a assertive flavor. It's very easy to pick out, but I think hiding right behind that, there's some more like rindy, fleshy parts of the watermelon. Not like the actual outside green part of the watermelon rind, but more like the white part after the pink fades off the inside of a watermelon. Crisp, juicy, that kind of thing. But really for me, that sort of candy profile sort of dominates. And what about percentages tested, you ask? Well, I don't think it was really an overflavoring issue because I've tested this at like 1%, 4%, and 8% with various different steeps. And each time, like, it gets a little bit more candied as you take it up, but really even down low, like that candy watermelon sort of comes out for me. It's definitely sort of a unique watermelon flavor. Can't really off the top of my head think of anything this really tastes exactly like. I think like the places where this would be the best would be the places that use an artificial but a soft watermelon flavor. It's kind of think of like a watermelon Slurpee. Like it has that kind of general stickiness to it and sweetness to it without just being like straight up tart. It also reminds me a lot of the watermelon in like Tiger's Blood snow cone. Like I feel like with Tiger's Blood, like you usually be adding like some kind of coconut component. And I feel like that latent creaminess of this watermelon is going to work fairly well with that. So I'd probably aim more towards like the frozen or chilled beverage spectrum rather than like the straight candy section, like watermelon rings or anything like that. But with that said, I feel like this has enough realistic components. It isn't like obnoxiously candied. Should fit most of the places you really want a watermelon if you can deal with like that kind of boozy sharpness. I feel like if you go back and take a look at like a strap-on recipe or something like that, like this would definitely work in a strap-on recipe. So as I said, I've been up and down like the percentage range with this. Personally, I'd probably mix around 2 or 3% as an accent. If you want the watermelon to be front and center, I'd probably bump that up to maybe even 6 or 7%. It gets a little bit more artificial that high, but it doesn't like taste bad. There's maybe a slight bit of muskiness, but nothing really unexpected from a melon flavor. It's an interesting concentrate. And then last for today, I have Vape Train Sorbet Base. First impression, that's a lot of mint. So that's not necessarily something I'd expect, right? If you're saying sorbet base. I don't know if this really does a base all that well. So there is some clarification on the Vape Train website where they say that in the US, this sorbet base means sherbet. But I don't get sherbet at all from this, actually. I know sherbet doesn't have like a whole bunch of cream or dairy to it, but it has like a certain creaminess, and this doesn't really feel creamy at all to me. So what I do taste, like I said, straight up front, there's a whole lot of mint here, and you'd think with like a base, you'd want something a little bit more neutral, more like a WS-23 neutral cooling vibe, but there's some definite, like, I want to say spearmint flavor and some actual mentholation, like it bites like mentholation. They may have added a little bit more of like neutral coolant on the back end, but whatever they're doing here, you get a very clear impression of mint just straight off the bat. And I wouldn't call it brutally cold, but I do like my menthols, so it does get fairly icy at higher percentages. So beyond just that mint, I do get some melon here, and that's kind of why I lumped it in with this group of flavors, because I think at its core, there is kind of a melon flavor. It's just a melon flavor with a whole lot of mint. The actual melon here just tastes kind of like artificial, like quote-unquote melon. It doesn't have like the stronger cantaloupe notes that something like their Shisha Melon does, and it doesn't really even taste like a candy watermelon flavor. It has like that sort of generic like Flavours wild melon, just melon mix taste. It's executed pretty well here. There is like a little bit of muskiness, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing in this application, actually. I feel like the slight muskiness kind of actually complements the melon. I feel like you need to like acknowledge the fact that it's there. But if you can just look at the way the flavor actually works with it, I think the musk is actually a pretty good addition. I kind of like the accent here, and I think it actually works pretty well with the cooling. It doesn't go like too perfumey or floral. It's just kind of an interesting accent on the back end. The most sorbet part of this for me would be the texture. This has like a nice, thick, dense texture to it, even through all of that cooling. I could see how it could kind of be like a frozen sorbet texture. Like that works out pretty well, but I do have some issues with it because I have issues with everything apparently. But it reminds me of the Real Flavors candy bases in that it's like a nice thick texture, but it's really hard to get other flavors to really work with it. Like it seems to be doing some really selective muting. I've tried mixing this with a couple different fruit flavors, and whatever that sorbet thing is that they're using, it tends to kind of deaden the flavors that you mix in with that. So that's interesting. I think because of that, if you are going to use this at like a low percentage, I'd probably use it at a fairly low percentage, probably under 1%, just because it's hard to get another bright flavor to really poke through this when it's all the way spun up. My favorite use of this is probably going to be actually just as a pretty easy single flavor, but then again, I like menthol and I kind of dig that weird musky accent on the back end of this. As a solo, I'd probably run it around 5 or 6%. So might be a little bit of a misnomer to have sorbet base on the bottle because you're not going to get away from that mint, and for me, I can't get away from that melon. But it's kind of an interesting mint and melon sorbet flavor. Thank you very much for watching. Feel like probably about the same level of rust. I don't think I got magically better at this from the last one, but you know, it's all good. If you want to go to tasteofconcrete.com, right there, see what I'm doing there? And fill out that poll on the flavors you want to see. That'd be awesome. We'll put together like 20 or 30 of them, and I'll start getting some videos out on there. So thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. I will catch you later.